Welcome to this autumn equinox rune reading that I am recording ahead of schedule on the 16th of August. I'm just going to share my screen now so that you will be able to see the runes that I have chosen. So let me just do this. Open it out. So the first rune that I chose is the one that also always represents the period, the day that I'm reading for, the autumn equinox, and what is around the days around that. But the time close by, the present time when we come to the equinox, and I'm always looking at it through the framework of the autumn equinox, of the fruit harvest, the late harvest. And I was also very much drawn to talk about the Mabon, whose name is taken for this festival. He is the son of the Earth Mother in Welsh Celtic mythology, and he is known as the child of the light, with which there is a little bit of a touch of irony, or is there? Because we're going into the darker time of the year, but I would rather see that as him almost as carrier of the light, in the same way that the power of nature continues to wane and to go into hibernation in the northern hemisphere. And if we look back far enough in time, way before the Welsh myths, although of course we don't know when they originated, how far back, but if we go back to ancient times, we know that our distant ancestors would go into their caves in the winter months with their storages of food and so on. And really they would slow down themselves as much as the nature, doing as little as possible, staying as close to the hearth as they could. And yet they were carrying the light ready for the spring and looking forward to that time. And I often wonder what must have gone through the minds of people who lived very closely to nature, knew all about these returning cycles, and just had to go with the flow. They couldn't do what we in recent generations have increasingly been able to do, of perhaps manipulating life in a way, or handling nature and life in such a way that we can almost ignore the seasons, with the exception of the weather. We can ignore the seasons if we want to. And with many modern day transportations, we can actually ignore the seasons a lot more than our grandparents and great grandparents did. So it's interesting how this comes about. But to come back to the reading, the first rune that came out representing for the autumn equinox is Cowan, or Kaunas. And Kaunas is an interesting rune because I always say it's like carrying a light. It's the fire energy. And here again, we have the theme that fits with Mabon, the child of the light, except this time the way it's fallen, with the point of Cowan uppermost. I always say in an individual reading that you cannot quite see the pathway you want to create. You cannot quite see the next step. Maybe it is there, maybe it is yet to be created, but that the person in that situation feels a little bit as though they're wearing a lampshade on their head, and we are going into the darker time of the year. So what does this speak of as an overarching theme around the solstice? That is quite interesting, because it does talk about not really being able to see the way, and yet we know that there is something that we need to say. It's this feeling of wanting to be able to see further ahead, wanting to be able to plan ahead, wanting to know how many things in everyday life for a lot of people will work out, but in a way being told to trust in another way, feeling that yes, trust is great and we do indeed need to trust. But at the same time, there's the desire to take hold of many different factors and to shape them on the anvil of life in the way that we would like to shape them. But the wherewithal to do that as freely as we would wish is not quite there yet. And then I drew 3 runes. When I say drew, I mean selected 3 runes on the unfolding themes that are unfolding between the equinox in a general way and Halloween on the 31st of October. And this was also quite in tune with that theme. It did nothing to counteract really the message of Cowan. And we've got Thorn or Thorizaz here. And this is a powerful energy. It's in its upright position. It very much speaks of barriers, boundaries, authority, and how we react to that authority and how we feel about it. Now, it is in its positive position. It's important to remember that. And really what it is saying here is that this is all being flagged up, this issue of authority, barriers, boundaries, what we can do, what we can't do, what we should expect, what we should realistically hope for, and what we can realistically shape. All of these things are up for consideration when this rune is here and it is a generalized reading like this, rather than a personal reading, although those qualities would apply in more precise ways if I was reading for a person. So when I look at this, I know that this is part of the ongoing cycle, something that is getting stronger. The need is being felt more, and people will be saying to themselves and to others, you know, I want to see what happens here. I want this outcome. I want that outcome. I want to see how it is going. And the other issue that is arising that's strong is in a way supportive of this. It doesn't negate it in any way. We've got Ura's which is about I always say this represents the force of the uroks, the great big cattle that we used to have in Northern Europe, like the bison in America. And these creatures, they were so powerful. People were in awe of them, but they were also much revered and much sought after, because one of these creatures, if you took the risk, the considerable risk that was necessary to capture one of these big, great beasts, you would have a lot of resources for your community, because the skin was useful. It could be used for clothing and for the outer casing of the home. The bones could be used to form new structures. The sinews that held the bones together, they could be used for all sorts of things, for housing, for the creation of housing, but in so many practical ways. And of course, the meat fed the people. So when we look at it this way, we're talking about the structure that supports the sustenance of the people, but also what is revered in a society, what is held to be important, what is championed, what is made much of, and the structure that holds that together. And in this reading, Uras is upside down, which says that, the issue of housing, sustenance, how that is managed for the benefit of the greater good, are question marks that are becoming bigger question marks, becoming stronger at this time. And also looking at the aspect of the structures that we have used to manage many different factors in life, in individual communities, in countries. But I feel intuitively much of this will be about how international relations are managed, although each country in a way will have to handle its own issues. Many are having to do that at this time, and we can already see that it's fairly obvious. But this is saying that, in a way, confirming that, but also the bigger picture, that the structures that we look at, that we used to say, well, that works with that, that works with that. If X happens, we do Y, and so on. Much of that we've been able to rely on, we will say, well, life has changed. In some ways, the world has changed. The way society has changed. And we're, increasingly aware that things that had worked as a structure are not working quite as well as they had. And yet we cannot see what exact direction can be gone in to put something better in place, or to evolve so that this works better. So I feel that life is going to bring that as a big question mark when different things come up in the autumn that are related to, in many cases, international relations and how affairs between countries are managed. And I'm not predicting doom and gloom here. I am just talking about the potential that shows here in the runes. It's not infallible, but it usually works out. And what this is saying here is that central to this time will be the theme of Cowan in its reverse position, the feeling of wearing a lampshade on one's head, knowing that the light is there, but at the same time, knowing that there is development that is necessary, but not sure what that could be. And with the different changes that are taking place, something will happen. You say, well, that's a good idea, but then something else happens and you think, the new structure isn't going to work ever so well with that, is it? And that is quite important to think about because it's showing here. And then we have Wanyo, also known as Vend, in the upside down position. Now, in its upright position, when it looks like an angular P, it is actually pointing towards winning, joy, success, happy things. And what it's showing is at the moment is that many people will feel that their communities and their societies are at the current time in a position where they can't quite see their way to success. So this fits in also with Uraz at the centre, the way it has fallen, and also with Thorizaz, with the barriers and the boundaries, because there will be some battling between more conservative ideas, those that don't want too much change but acknowledge that the system is broken, but think, well, little minor tweaks might make a difference. But it does need to be more than minor tweaks, and increasingly people will be seeing that this is what we need to look at. What can develop better here? How can we respond to that which is happening is the overarching question. How can we respond to the many different challenges that are presenting in quite a chaotic way during the autumn? This applies to different things that are going on, different things that are happening. I feel including in nature. There could well be some new news that comes out about what Mother Earth needs, and we might feel, there might be a general consensus of, well, how do we handle that in addition to everything else, or do we just push it under the carpet? But of course, everything is part of the whole, and that will be the challenge to bear in mind. But in a way, Wanyo, even in the upside down position, is positive because it does tell us that a turning point needs to be created. And when there is an increasing awareness of that, it does make a difference to how it is thought of, how it is worked with. And I know that many people take an interest in politics, and I would say if you are interested in the change of prime ministership that takes place in the UK on the 5th of September, which is, just over a couple of weeks before the solstice, I would say look at my rune reading on that, and I will put a link on the video below so that you can move to it easily if you would want to do that. But I am stressing here that we're not purely talking about politics, but of course it is politics in a way that handles international affairs. So they do come into it, but in this particular reading, not specific to the UK, although in the UK the changes add another layer there, and I do feel that there are more challenges within politics or governance, especially in several countries, but especially in the UK and the US, because it seems to be happening with them at the same time that things are in more, perhaps more disarray than we are used to. And we've got used to some disarray, but a little bit more. And the consoling thing in this reading is that there is, as I say, although Vend Wanyo is upside down, the turning point meaning is strong. And when that is recognized by more people in more situations, then evolution does tend to flow better, does tend to take place. So these are the thoughts that I would really like to leave with you with this reading, because I don't like to leave anything on a downhearted note. And I wish you a very happy autumn equinox, even though it seems incredible that I am talking about now, just a few weeks away, the point that is halfway between the summer solstice and the winter solstice, halfway to Yule, and that just seems extraordinary. But thank you for joining me, and if you've enjoyed this, maybe you would like to take a further look at my channel, because there are quite a few readings and also a few presentations on other things, including my travels